because talking of Matthew 24, he did say, when you see the abomination of desolation standing where he, it's a masculine pronoun, ought not to, then flee. That's a sign, too, right? That's a very important sign. Okay, leaving that alone, Ezekiel, there's Daniel, which for me is Daniel the prophet. Jesus said Daniel the prophet. If I don't think he's the prophet Daniel, then I've abandoned Jesus from my point of view. The 8th chapter is very interesting to me because it gets more specific. You know, when you teach, you put out a general idea, and then you say, let's unpack the details. Isn't that the way you teach things? Well, in the 2nd chapter, you had 4 kingdoms, you know that. And the last one was the kingdom of God. You're aware of that. So eventually the story ends, well, the kingdom of God prevails. But you've got 4 different kings. The top one was Babylon. Remember that? That was Nebuchadnezzar. That's the bad guy. Although he had his moments where he nearly got good, then he fell apart again. That's our story. They were talking on NPR as I was driving out to get our friends at Warren's this morning. They were saying, the Babylonians got the zodiac thing wrong on the radio today. So if you thought you were Sagittarius or Sagittarius and you're really something else, don't sweat it. Because we now are doing astronomy, but not astrology. The Babylonians got it wrong. It's not fascinating. So all evils stem probably from Babylon. Right? That's the heart of all evil. Okay, so you've got 4 kingdoms, and the 4th one is the kingdom of God. Then you've got in chapter 7, apparently 4 more kingdoms, and I'll leave that open. Are they all still future in some way, or is it a repeat of chapter 2? We'll leave that open for the moment. When you get to chapter 8, you get very specific. So I want David particularly to remember all the G's go for Alexander the Great, the goat, and the Greece. Aha, 3 G's. Alexander the Great is the goat in this thing, literally, and that happens to be Greece. That's absolutely clear. Alexander the Great is a remarkable character. He died of wine, women, and song at the age of 33. Weeping because there wasn't any more world to conquer. Oh, poor chap, you know. Poor chap. That's pathetic, by the way. Alexander the Goofball or Alexander the Great? I'm not sure. We tend to overvalue those things. You're going to read about him. Okay, chapter 8, we're going to read it around the room and see what you think of this. Chapter 7, here we are, chapter 8. It gets quite specific. You're going to get some detail here you didn't get before. Right, I'll start with 8:1. Around 550 BC. In the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar, the king, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, subsequent to the one which appeared to me previously.
I looked in the vision, and it came about while I was looking that I was in the citadel of Susa, which is in the province of Elam. And I looked in the vision, and I myself was beside the Ulai Canal.
As I looked up, I saw in front of me a ram with 2 long horns standing beside the river. One of the horns was longer than the other, even though it had begun to grow later than the shorter one.
Yeah.
I watched the ram run into things with its horns. I watched the ram run to the west, north, south. No animal could stop the ram, and no one could save the other animals. That ram did whatever it wanted, and it became very powerful.
As I was considering, behold, a male goat came from the west across the face of the whole earth without touching the ground, and the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes.
He came to the ram with the 2 horns, which I had seen standing on the bank of the canal, and he ran at him in his powerful wrath.
I saw him come close to the ram, and he was enraged against him, and struck the ram into stick and broke his 2 horns, and the ram had no power to stand before him, but to cast him down was no one to the ground and trampled on him. Good. And there was no one who could rescue the ram from his power.
Good reading. Excellent. Excellent.
And the he-goat, that's the American Standard Version,
yep,
magnify himself exceedingly. And when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and instead of it, there came up 4 notable horns towards the 4 winds of heaven.
Okay, let's pause there and think about that. try to get the substance of it. Every detail doesn't matter, but clearly you're dealing with specific nations here. You've got Medo-Persia, which for me is the second one in that second chapter, Medo-Persia, and then you've got the one that takes over, which is Greece, right? So GGG, Greece, Alexander the Great, and he's the goat. The earlier one was the ram, which was Medo-Persia. One of them came up stronger and later stronger. All that's clear. You can study your history books for the detail of all that. That's quite clear. What I'm interested in is the future part, mainly. I'm not uninterested in the past, but I'm interested in how does it turn out in the end. Well, in verse 8 you had the male goat, that's GGG, Greece, Alexander the Great, magnified himself exceedingly, but as soon as he was as mighty, the large horn was broken. That presumably is Alexander the Great, is the principal one there. And in its place there came up 4 conspicuous horns in various directions. Now that's the interesting part to me when you get to the explanation that's going to come. So think of the first kingdom, Babylon, think of Medo-Persia, think of Greece, and then think of fourness, right? Out of Greece comes a fourfold thing, including, of course, before that, Alexander the Great. Keep that picture in mind, and let's move on now and get the whole picture rather quickly. Verse 9, who's going to do 9 for us?
You.
Me. Out of one of them, right, out of one of the 4, came forth a rather small horn, which grew exceedingly great towards the south, towards the east, and towards Israel, the beautiful land.
It grew up to the host of heaven, and caused some of the host and some of the stars to fall to the earth, and it trampled them down.
He even challenged the commander of heaven's armies by canceling the daily sacrifices offered to him and by destroying his temple.
Yes, 12. 12.
Because of this sin, the daily sacrifices were stopped. Truth was thrown down to the ground. The little horn did these things and was very successful.
Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the one who spoke, "For how long is the vision concerning the regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate, and the giving over of the sanctuary and host to be trampled underfoot?"
And he said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state.
Yeah, beautiful. Let's stop there. Don't you sigh a sigh of relief there? It comes out right. It's always bad before it gets good. And it's always trouble leading finally to restoration. Now I have to tell you then that this thing about the sanctuary, the regular sacrifice in 13, is very, very close to the idea of the abomination of desolation. It's the same language. Now, there's a lot of dispute about this, and I'll give you our futurist take. So think abomination of desolation in that verse, right? Jesus was interested in that. So I immediately remind you of the key to all this is Matthew 24, Mark 13, where Jesus said, wars and rumors of wars. It's rather general, right? Earthquakes, and you can say, oh, there are more or less now. All of that's rather general. Then when he got to verse 15, Jesus, our teacher, our rabbi, says, however, when you see the abomination of desolation standing where he ought not to, in a holy place, then if you're in Judea, it doesn't say what you do if you're in Carrollton or Savannah. I'll leave that for the time to come. This is future to me. Then if you are in Israel, head for the hills. Get out of it. Because this will trigger a time of the Great Tribulation, which is definitely for me future, because that Antichrist figure, abomination of desolation, has not clearly been fulfilled yet for me. Yes, you can talk about Titus and all that. However, Titus doesn't quite fit with Daniel. That's another subject. But for me, that's still future. So the Great Tribulation. Now, not general tribulation. You're all going through tribulation, as Acts 14:22. Through much tribulation, we're into the King. That's quite distinct from the Great Tribulation. That's a special time of unparalleled difficulty. So it's triggered, though, by the abomination of desolation, and one of the references is right here, I suggest. So, if you're taking any notes, there are 4 references to the abomination of desolation in Daniel. 4. This is key, because Jesus, our rabbi, talked about abomination of desolation. You'll find one, of course, in the 8th chapter here. You'll find one in the 11th chapter, you know that. Or be verse 31, isn't it? 11:31. And you'd find it in 12:11. Let me run them again. You'll find it here, 8:13. It's very similar language about abomination. You'll find it in, what was it go? 11:31. 11:31, yeah. He's checking me up with his magic pad here. Can't get away with anything. 11:31, and you will find it also in 12:11.
It's not in 9?
And that's my fourth one. You'll find it in chapter
That's
9.
where we're going.
We're going backwards, it doesn't matter. I'm giving you 4. In chapter 9, 26, 27.
Right.
27. Okay, let's run them again. You'll find it in 9:27. You'll find it in 8:13. You'll find it in 11:31. And you'll find it in 12:11. Now, to do your study on this, you've got to look them all up, right? Because your Rabbi Jesus said, when you see the A of D standing where he ought not to, as Daniel said, so you say, okay, let's go back and look at all of them. You've got to harmonize all of those together. And that A of D triggers the Great Tribulation. So when you go to Olive Garden for a celebration occasionally, we walk and we say, folks, this is not the Great Tribulation. That's said against historicists who say the Great Tribulation began in 70 and you've been in it for 2,000. I don't think so. Today, this is not the Great Tribulation. It's worse than this. It's a short burst of agonizing trouble just prior to the second coming, which was in 1914, as you said so well, right? I suggest that. And what I said there is classical futurism. It's been done by hundreds of... I'm not inventing anything new, but if you really think you're living in the Great Tribulation now, I suggest that you might want to adjust that. Yes, you can talk about tribulations, that's true, but we're not in the Great Tribulation, I think. So this 8:13 is fascinating to me. There's got a regular sacrifice, however we deal with that, and the transgression which causes horror. It's very similar language to the abomination of language. It's the same idea. Okay, that's the story. So, what have we learned? We've got the ram, and then we had a goat, which was Alexander the Great, and Greece, right? That happened in history. But when I'm interested in what happens then eventually, see, well, we're going to find out. There's some more coming to do with the fourness that came out of Alexander's kingdom. You got it? Alexander's kingdom, he died at 33. His kingdom was divided into 4 major areas. It happened. But it ain't the end of the story, because you'll see that the chapter is going to go beyond that, I'm suggesting. Okay, here's the explanation that Gabriel gave us. What about 15? Who's going to read that? Devin's going to read. Okay.
When I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it. And behold, there stood before me one having the appearance of a man.
Yes. 18.
Uh,
Sorry, 16.
Daniel?
And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision.
Right. 17 says, so he came near to where I was standing, and when he came I was frightened and fell on my face. And he said to me, Son of man, understand that the vision pertains to the time of the end. Please note that carefully, the time of the end. And 18, Sarah?
Now while he was talking with me, I sank into a deep sleep with my face to the ground. But he touched me and made me stand upright.
Then he said, I am here to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath. What you have seen pertains to the very end.
Okay, let's pause there. Now, you may wonder about what's this time of the end. For me, the first place to stop there would be the time of the end as we understand it in the future. I wouldn't just jump and say, well, this is 200 BC. It's unlikely. It's possible. But it's not my first choice, at least. So I'm suggesting the time of the end, which occurs in other places in Daniel, is the time of the end as we would think of it. Really the time of the end. I have no idea how long before Jesus comes back. I have no idea. The only data that I have is when you see the abomination of desolation standing, then head for the hills, then there'll be a time of tribulation. Then you would know. But right now, I have no idea. I don't think Jesus will come back today. In fact, I'm sure he won't. However, if I belong to a dispensationalist American Baptist church, I would say he could come back today. Because in their system they have 2 second comings, right? I don't recommend you do that one. That's what they call the pre-tribulation rapture. They do believe in a future great tribulation, but before it, Jesus will come and take all the saints to heaven for 7 years, and then come back again publicly. That would be a double second coming. I advise you not to go with that. It's too complicated. How about 1 second coming? That's probably enough, right? So, I'm not talking about a pre-tribulation rapture at all. However, I'm thinking that there's some trouble ahead. When it is, I don't know. If you've got any data on that, I don't think we do. It could be 500 years. I don't know that. There could be all sorts of things in the Middle East. It could be. I don't think that's likely. But then Adventist people, of which we are part, have always said, look how bad it is. You know, in the 1850s, oh, this is terrible. It couldn't get any worse than that. Now, if they came and saw the election proceedings in America, they would say, you mean it was still going? It couldn't get any worse. So, I mean, leave that open. Just don't set any dates, though, right? Before you set a date, please report to the church, you know, before you make it all something like that. So all I'm saying is, yes, comment. What do you got?
Remember, we got an audience.
Yes.
Let's see. Okay. Oh, first, well, I don't know if you want to go. Did you do the thing about the where is it? The times.
The 2300.
We haven't
deal with that? Are you going to
talk? Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. We can
So
do
you'll
it.
get. And
Yeah.
the other one
Yeah.
is
Good.
a question about. So you talk about the Great Tribulation.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So the question is this a global tribulation?
Oh, okay.
In other words, will indigenous tribes?
Yes. And the answer, I have no idea. All I know is that in the Bible, the Middle East is really the world. Joseph and Mary go to... The whole world went to be taxed, right? I don't know. One would think that anything major political would affect the world. I just don't know that. It certainly affects the Middle East, by the way. Europe is not the scene. Now, all sorts of bad things can happen in Europe, I see that. But we were misled in the Armstrong days to think that Europe was the fourth kingdom, because Rome had to be. So we went to visit the Antichrist. We did. Students. We were taken to Europe to visit Herr Strauss. And he was the Antichrist. That was foolish. We were in the wrong arena. Now, the Middle East is where I would look. So you could watch the Middle East. So let's deal with that one in...
Corey adds to
Yes.
that Revelation 8:7.
Yes. Which says-
Well, where 1/3 of the earth was burnt up.
Right. Okay. If that's the earth rather than the land, then yes, it suggests a global thing to me, but I wouldn't dogmatize. Absolutely. It sounds horrible, doesn't it? Sounds horrific.
You cited Matthew 24,
Yes,
obviously, which
right.
is key to all this. And
Yes.
there are obviously natural disasters
Yes.
on a level not seen before.
Right.
So that's bound to affect
Yes.
more
Yeah.
than just
Fair enough. Fine.
Middle East, right?
Absolutely. Luke particularly has Jesus saying that there are great earthquakes, whatever that's going to be, some worse than we've seen. I don't know. All of that is not clear. What is clear to me is this gospel of the kingdom, this gospel of the kingdom must be preached in the entire world. I take that to mean the entire world. And then, what's the next word? And then the end will come. When you therefore see, do you see the connection? Then the end will come. Now I'll tell you how the end is marked. When you see the abomination of desolation. That is a very clear sign. Now you talked about the sign when Christ comes visibly. That's also a sign. Fine. I get that. There's also an indicator when you see the abomination.
Also, the church, for us who are in the know,
Yes.
we have, it's a marker, it's a huge sign, right?
Yes.
That things are going on, unprecedented and consequential.
Which is that?
The markers of Matthew 24.
Oh, absolutely. Clearly.
So we,
Yes.
we who are in the know, says Paul
Yes.
in Thessalonians, for
Yes.
example. So we will see things that we have never seen before.
Of
So
course.
obviously this
Yes.
would also affect other.
Probably. I would think so, yes, absolutely. I mean, whether the people in the far reaches of Iceland feel the effect like they do, I don't know that, but let's wait and see. What I do know is that when you see the abomination standing where it's a he, masculine pronoun, not just it, either a statue of somebody or himself standing in a holy place. It's a he. You lost that in some of your translations, a very important masculine pronoun right there in the Greek that most
Milk
of us-
says a time of trouble like never before, Daniel 12:1.
Got it.
And Randy, Hebrews 10:37, yet a little while, and
Yes.
the coming one will come and will not delay.
Excellent. I'm glad he mentioned Daniel 12:1. I should have done it. If you're talking about the Great Tribulation with your friends, you must go to Daniel. What people don't do is that they do Jesus. They seem to have forgotten the Old Testament. Jesus said, when you see the abomination of spoken by Daniel, and people then make up the abomination, it doesn't fit with Daniel. So, great point there from Randy. Daniel 12:1 is the basis for the Great Tribulation. That's what Jesus is quoting it.
Yeah, it shall be a time unsurpassed
Yes.
in distress.
Yes.
So it sounds pretty good.
I don't think you can have two great tribulations. You can have lots of tribulation in your life. But you can only have one unprecedented. There's never was a time before it, and there never will be a time after it. You can only have one of those. And Jesus was quoting Daniel 12 this way.
Right, and Daniel 12 goes on to give us the huge, unprecedented
The
thing.
resurrection of the dead. This is key.
Right, so it's not,
I've noticed that over the years that people will talk about the abomination of desolation and forget that Daniel spoke about it. They make it up. No. It's close to the resurrection of the dead. Please note Daniel 12:1. What does the second verse say then? One of your favorite verses, right?
yeah, it says...
Many of those who are sleeping in the dust of the ground, tells you what they're doing sleeping, where they're doing it in the ground, will arise in resurrection, right? That is absolutely critical.
Some to everlasting life, others to damnation.
Yes. Some to the life of the age to come. You'll hear us using that phrase. Eternal life is not wrong, but it's not accurate. It's the life of the age to come. It's a vague translation that does eternal life. It's not wrong, it's fine. But more precisely in that Jewish environment, it's the life of the age to come. So there's an age to come.
Question, was Satan hurled down in 1914?
Well, I don't think he was. Apparently, I didn't see that.
Question,
Yeah, that was the question.
I don't think Jesus came back in 1914. I'm sure of that.
That all happened.
Yes.
That's what sparked
Yes.
1914
Yes.
when
Yes.
Christ was enthroned as king in
Yes.
1914.
Yes.
Then he cast out.
I see. Yes.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for us, that's still future, a sort of final burst of satanic activity like the future. I mean, the premises were clearly wrong there. First of all, the 25-20-year thing doesn't work. I think the 603 date was wrong as well. Now they're almost admitting that. So the premises were enough wrong to get the conclusion wrong on that particular thing. So,
the heat,
yes.
quick question, the heat
Yes.
in the...
Mark 13:14.
in
Mark 13:14. The parallel in Mark 13, parallel to Matthew 24. Mark 13:14.
And traditionally, that's why the people have looked to an individual, like a tiger.
Yes.
So it's
That's
been,
right.
it's been a well-known thing that
Of course.
it's a person.
It has. It just helped. The grammar just helps you there. Your translation may not have a he. There's a place for technicians in every job. Heaven forbid that everybody in the church is fighting over Greek words. We don't want that. But there's a place in every job for people who are watching the technicalities. This happens to be an interesting one. When you see the abomination of desolation, it's Mark 13:14.
And it's
Saying
interesting
where
what
he-
Mark goes on to say, the reader should pay careful attention.
Yes, exactly.
It's
The reader should pay careful attention.
an interesting-
It's a he. So it has to be a personality of some sort, I think. Either his own statue, in a holy place, whatever, but there's an individual involved, an anti-Christian figure. Okay, so then you flee. If you're in Savannah, I don't know what you do. We'll come and go in your basement in Savannah and shelter with you, or whatever. You can store up food. Now that's humorous. Okay, let's go back to the topic and read some more, because I want to get the whole chapter, if we can, for you to think about.
Where are we?
21.
One.
21? No? 20.
20?
20. Who's doing 20?
Actually,
Okay.
20.
As for the ram that you saw with the two horns, these are the kings of Media and Persia.
Okay, let's stop right there. Is that easy or not? That's rather easy, isn't it? The ram, is no question, is the Medo-Persian Empire, which is history, certainly. So that's all past. Then the next verse says,
And the
21.
goat is the king of Greece,
Mhm.
and the great horn between his eyes is the first king.
22. Given.
As for the horn that was broken, in place of which 4 others arose,
Mhm.
4 kingdoms shall arise from his nation,
Yes.
but not with his power.
Okay, let's stop there because you're getting is the picture becoming a little clearer than when we started. You've got Greece, right? You've got Alexander the Great. But that kingdom is divided into four. So you think four coming out of it. But notice this is a Greek kingdom. We're not talking Rome here. We're not talking Europe. We're talking Middle East. And somehow there's a fourness that comes out. Now we're getting to the really interesting verse, 23. What does that say?
And in the latter time
Yes.
of their kingdom,
Aha.
when the transgressors are come to the full,
Yes.
a king of fierce continence
Yes.
and understanding dark sentences shall stand up.
Good. And his power will be mighty, not by his own power, and he will destroy to an extraordinary degree and prosper and perform his will. He will destroy mighty men and saints, holy people. And verse 25, Sarah.
And through his shrewdness he will cause deceit to succeed by his influence, and he will magnify himself in his heart, and he will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even oppose the prince of princes, but he will be broken without human agency.
25, 6.
This vision about the 2,300 evenings and mornings is true, but none of these things will happen for a long time, so do not tell anyone about them yet.
27. Antoine's turn, 27.
And I, Daniel, was overcome and lay sick for some days.
Yeah.
Then I rose and went about the king's business, but I was appalled by the vision and did not understand it.
Okay, and you might well be exhausted, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is an awful thing he saw. He was exhausted. He was working for the king. He was a brilliant, bright Jew in the Babylonian kingdom, and they spotted these good men. They said, put them in charge of important things. You do. Jewish people tend to be very talented when they get it right. So that's wonderful. But notice the picture here. You've got Medo-Persia, and you've got Greece divided into four, and then the 23rd verse is key. In the latter period of their rule, the latter period, the Hebrew word is acharit, and the acharit, it means the last stage. So I suggest to you, we're looking at the last stage of some Greek kingdom, one of the four, right? Doesn't say which one. We're looking at the last stage of one of the four that came out of Alexander the Great. Isn't that the picture that I think you'd all take away from this? This sounds awfully like an anti-Christian figure to me, doesn't it? I mean, or do you think this is... it's not... It's a very harmful person. He's awful. I mean, he's really about as wicked as you can get. So, let's talk about Antichrist a moment in the New Testament. Where do you find the word Antichrist? The answer is you find it in 1 John chapter 2, verse 18. Right? The word Antichristos, Antichrist, which for me is opposition to Christ by imitation. It's both against Christ and imitating Christ. It's clever, right? If you really want to be clever and deceptive, you say, well, I am Jesus, I am Christ, but you're actually against him. So, Antichristos, that word occurs only in 1 John 2:18. And John there says, you've heard that Antichristos is coming. He did not say that was wrong. They had heard that. The Old Testament was full of it, the New Testament was full of it. There was a final bad guy. That's a big story on its own, but there was a big... We've heard that. But let me tell you something else. Right now, in the first century, the spirit of that Antichrist is at work. And I think that accounts for all the chaos that we've seen, by the way. So the anti-Christian spirit was certainly at work. But he didn't deny the first premise. People say, well, no future Antichrist, it's only the spirit of it. No, both. And the best commentators see that. I think that's right. I get the sense that Paul did the same thing with the man of sin, right? We don't need to turn there, but in 2 Thessalonians 2, the man of sin, the man of sin that Jesus is going to what? Slay with the breath of his lips. You know those verses. So that has to be somebody living when Christ comes back, right? The final man of sin, he's a Judas figure, seems to me to be this awful, wicked horn. Antiochus Epiphanes, if you like, in history, he was a bad guy. He was awful. He was anti-Semitic to the point of madness. He killed babies, and he had women strutting around the streets with their dead babies on their shoulders. But this is not what Jesus is talking about exactly, right? Because Jesus is talking about the same stuff future to him. So you can certainly say that Antiochus is a type, a pattern. Just like you can say that Moses is a pattern of Jesus. You know that, typology. You can say the rock that followed them was a pattern of Jesus in the future. All that's clear. But this sounds to me like the anti-Christian figure. So what have we got to say about him?
Well,
Verse
can I,
19. Yes,
can I
please.
say,
Yes.
so we deal a lot with the preterist so-called
Yes, we do.
view,
Mm-hmm.
which applies a lot, if not all of this, to Antiochus
Yes.
Epiphanes
Right.
in 165
Mhm.
BC.
Yeah.
But it's interesting here, the description of this figure, starting in verse, let's see, 10,
Mm-hmm.
8:10.
Mm-hmm.
It had an army that grew.
Yes.
It says it reached the army of heaven, so
Yes.
it's just huge, right?
Yeah.
Brought about the fall
Mm-hmm.
of the army
Yeah.
and some of the stars to the ground. So it did, you know.
Sort of cosmic
Amazing
battle
thing.
stuff. Yeah. How some of the phrases are difficult.
Also,
Saints.
it acted arrogantly, it
Yeah.
says, against the prince of the army.
Yeah.
Okay, and then at the bottom here in verse
Mhm.
24,
Yeah.
his power will be great.
Mhm.
He will cause terrible destruction. He will be successful in what he undertakes. He will destroy powerful people and the people of the Holy One. He'll destroy this, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, my point is that if you go and do a list
Mm-hmm.
of the descriptive things about this figure,
Mm-hmm.
no way, historically speaking, what we know of Antiochus,
Yes.
no way that was Antiochus, and no way was that Titus either, by the way.
Titus is also
So-
problematic for other reasons.
So Antiochus, just to give you an
Right.
example, was actually a failed,
Yes.
uh,
Failed Antichrist.
um,
Yes.
a failed general of,
Right.
of armies
Yeah.
of Alexander's descendants. He was one of the worst.
Yeah.
He tried to, just an example, historically we know this, that he tried to invade Egypt and
Mhm.
he was repelled.
Yeah.
He was so poor that he had to go and sack some city,
Mhm.
some pagan temple in Babylon,
Yeah.
which is where he died. So he didn't die where the prophecy
Right.
says this figure, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So
Don't.
the point is, just go down the list.
Yeah.
It's useful to, and take out all the descriptors.
Yeah.
of
He's certainly
this
an anti-Christian figure, right?
Awesome.
No question. But he's not, I think, the Antichrist. My premise here is that Jesus talked about the abomination of desolation in this chapter 2, right? Clearly, he's not talking about Antiochus Epiphanes, bad though the guy was. So that's a great point. For me, this is, let's just say, this is the bad guy. There is a final bad guy. I know that from many texts. And he appears to be the Assyrian. There's another connection here. If you could, I don't know if you can bear this connection as well. The Assyrian. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians 2 a moment, because we've got just time to do this. 2 Thessalonians 2. We're not normally, as detailed as that, but
If I could throw in a question here.
Yes, please. What have they got?
From Michelle.
Yes.
She's
Yes.
having some audio issues, and I'm sorry
Yeah.
if you can hear me, but we're having some
Oh dear.
audio
Oh
issues,
dear.
like blips. But her question is from verse 23 onward.
Yeah.
So that's the future
Mhm.
Antichrist. She just wants
Yeah.
to make sure.
Right. That's right.
Mhm.
That's in the latter, the Acharit, the last phase of one of the 4 divisions of that kingdom. Middle East, right? We're expecting the bad guy. Now, in 2 Thessalonians, this is easier because you have this amazing stuff. 2 Thessalonians 2, 1. Let me read just to get the gist of it here. We request you, brothers and sisters, with regard to the parousia, coming, not presence, coming, arrival. Of course, it's also presence. When you come, you're present. But we'll go with the word parousia, second coming, of our Lord Jesus Messiah, and our gathering together with him. Don't be quickly shaken from your composure. Don't be disturbed either by a spirit or a message or a letter pretending to come from us. You see the work of the devil here? Isn't that amazing? A false, lying preacher, the devil himself, somebody sending a letter that claims to be from Paul and isn't. I want you to know the devil is very keen to get us all confused all the time.
Mhm.
That's why you guys are so good at searching truth. We have to be careful. All right, now look at the pile-up of words here. That you be not quickly shaken by spirit and so on, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. So he's equating the parousia with the day of the Lord there. Clearly, right? Let me talk to you about the parousia. I don't want anybody to tell you that the day of the Lord, and the Greek is a little bit unclear here, either is already here or is about to come next Monday, right? Whichever doesn't make too much difference. Somebody's saying, hey, 1914, folks. And it turned out to be wrong. Somebody in 1988 said, what, 88 reasons why Jesus is coming back in 1988, and he sold 1 million copies. 89 reasons why he's coming back. Just don't go there. It's not worth risking your neck on this. So this is some of the most important stuff on our subject here. Let no one in any way fool you. How should we paraphrase? Scam you, trick you, deceive you, pull the wool over your eyes. Don't let anybody, doesn't matter who it is, for goodness sake, don't get this wrong. Because something has to happen first. Apostasy. There has to be a massive falling away from truth. Now that's a little bit less clear because there wasn't apostasy. Certainly there is still. It doesn't quite tie it down precisely, but the rest of it is a bit closer. He says the apostasy has to come first, and then the man of lawlessness is revealed. Now that's a very strong word, by the way. Revealed is not just I'm creeping on the scene. It's like, whoa, here I am.
Is that a parousia word?
Yes, he's going to talk about the parousia of this individual very shortly. That man's going to have to be revealed. He's called the son of destruction, and guess who was also called that? Judas, right? Same language, also called the son of destruction. Now, 4, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being a God or God, doesn't matter, a divine figure. I don't know if he's actually saying I am God, that's pretty stupid, but he's saying I am a God, I'm a divine figure, whatever, doesn't matter, claiming some amazing thing. And then notice verse 5. Don't you remember Paul said that while I was with you, I used to be telling you these things. Oh, no, preach on Christian living, Anthony. Let's just do that. We don't do prophecy. Wait a minute. When Paul was with them, founding the church, probably 3 or 4 weeks only, he gave them all of this stuff and more. So we all need this material. Don't you remember that while I was still with you, I used to, an imperfect tense, I used to be telling you day after day as he lectured to them. I get it. And now, he says in 6, you know what restrains this wicked guy? I don't. Nobody does for sure. Maybe it's the angelic forces that keep the politics in check. Whatever. I don't know for sure. He didn't say. Doesn't matter. Something is holding it back. But the bad guy eventually emerges. The mystery of lawlessness, the secret working, right, of lawlessness, is clearly at work. Only he who is now restraining, it's a person, whoever that is exactly, will go on doing so until he, the restrainer, is taken out of the way. And then that lawless one, it's a single individual, will be revealed. Wow! It's a spectacle, right? Will be revealed, strong word. Revealed. Whom the Lord Jesus, that is, will slay with the breath of his mouth and bring to an end by the appearing, the outshining of his parousia. Wow! 1914 isn't looking so good, is it? Isn't this amazing stuff? These 8 verses are incredible. By the outshining, there are 3 words for the second coming. Parousia, this one, epiphania, means shining bright. Right? And the other one is apocalypsis, meaning revelation. So Jesus is going to kill this bad guy off. Does Devin enjoy thrilling stories?
Every hero has a nemesis.
Oh, exactly.
Did you spell that difficult word?
You want to get
Yeah, right. One of our very bright young attendees, he should be preaching, he said, every hero has a nemesis. Wow. So you're all grabbing your dictionaries out there. I love it. He's on to next week, right? You ready to sermon on being blind without knowing you're blind?
Just a comment.
Okay, comment, Chip.
Lorna's got a very good observation, I thought.
Lorna.
Verse 25.
Yes.
which says,
And Daniel.
yeah, Daniel
Yeah.
8:25.
Yes.
By his treachery,
Yes.
he will succeed through deceit.
Yes.
Her translation has, where is it? By peace shall destroy many, has her translation.
In peace, you said?
By peace
Yes.
shall destroy many.
Yes.
So she's fascinated by that, that
Yes.
this figure comes in a peaceful way,
Yes.
but at the end of that is utter destruction. And she tied it to 1 Thessalonians
Yes.
5:3, which is
Yes.
a good verse.
When they shall say peace. Exactly, that's the right connection.
So that's a good
A very good
observation,
connection.
That this is, and I was telling them, this is like when, you know, that you hear those stories, you see a car broken down on the road at night, and you stop, you know what, and then thieves.
Yeah.
So this person,
Mm.
who is a political, I'm not
Yeah.
going to touch
Oh, yes, too. Yeah. Obviously.
comes through peaceful means,
Yeah.
peaceful covenants.
Yeah.
Oh, everything's great, it's fine.
Absolutely.
This guy's
Yep. So what our friend Lorna has done for us very well out there is to join the dots. In Bible study, you join the dots, you string the pearls. If you join the dots wrong, it's chaos, right? The Jews called that Gezerah Shabbat. They said, if you've got a word here and another word over here, same word, you put them together and combine them. That's the method. It's when you don't join the dots. The classic example is people say, when you see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel, excuse me. No, they make it up. They say, well, this is so-and-so and so-and-so. No, you didn't join the dots. So what Lorna's inviting us to do very well there is join the dots.
right.
When they say peace, this is exactly Daniel 8. To me, suggests strongly that Daniel 8 is in Paul's mind here. Right? He's a crafty guy, this fellow, isn't he?
There was an interesting
Very
commentary, just to get a bit political.
Yeah, okay.
There was an interesting commentary where someone wrote that they feared one person over the other in this election
Mm-hmm.
because it wasn't so much. So this is from a Christian point of view. They
Yeah.
feared the one over the other because it was more of a corrupting influence
Yeah,
for those who call themselves Christians
yeah.
than the other opposition, which is more of an outside thing.
Yeah.
So the point is that it was an insidious
Yes,
sort of form where it's poison from within, the
Yes.
commentary said.
absolutely.
Isn't that interesting? And people, he says, are not seeing it.
Right.
And I'm seeing it, I'm shy.
Yeah.
It's
It's fascinating. It's obviously very subtle, and only those who are really watching
Yeah.
will see through it.
That's what those.
So that's the anti-Christian figure in chapter 8. He comes out of then one of the four divisions of the Greek kingdom. Now I was just doing for you the parallel in 2 Thessalonians 2, and I have to finish this point by telling you this. Where is Paul quoting from in 2 Thessalonians 2:8? Here's where your marginal references are so important. Paul is quoting the Old Testament. Anybody see, where does he get this thing about the Lord Jesus will slay this person with the breath of his lips and bring him to nothing by the outshining of his parousia? Where's Paul getting that from? Marginal
Isaiah
reference?
11:4.
Ah. It's Isaiah 11:4. All right, this is for Devin's benefit particularly. Isaiah 11:4, that's 1:14. Parallel to 2 Thessalonians 2:8, that's 2:8. This is the 1:14, 2:8 connection. Very interesting. Now, so what you do is you have to go back and read the whole context in Isaiah 11. And guess who the bad guy is? He's called the Assyrian. Now that's a slightly vague geographical term, but it points to Iraq, it points to Iran, it points to the Middle East. So for Paul, the Assyrian is the bad guy. How do I know? Because Isaiah is talking about the Assyrian, right? Who's going to punish Israel. Guess what? Paul is bringing that forward into 2 Thessalonians 2:8. So we have one learned saying from our friend David today. Every hero has his nemesis. He gets his comeuppance. This fellow.
So if you have Christ, you have Antichrist.
You have Christ, you have Antichrist. And you have the 1:14, 2:8 connection. These are things to be shared around the coffee table, by the way. as far as people would like to do.
The other thing people are talking
Yes.
online here is about the signs and wonders this
Yes.
year.
Oh,
So a true nemesis has to emulate his
right,
Mhm.
right,
hero, right?
absolutely.
So that's a very important thing, right?
Signs and wonders, one of the come-ons of the Antichrist is he does miracles, right? So we have to say then, a miracle in itself is not a proof of God doing anything by itself. You know, there was a limit to what those magicians in Egypt could do. They couldn't turn rods into people, is that right?
No, they,
Snakes,
they,
or
they could emulate
do that
the
up to a certain point.
rods into
Yeah.
snakes, but not
Okay.
turning the seed to
That's right.
blood.
There's a limit. You're right. Your correction is correct. They could do some amazing things, but there's a limit to what they can do. So if somebody falls flat on their backs, you know, and somebody pushing them over in the church, that's not a proof of anything at all. Because a lot of people trade on that. Oh, he's speaking a foreign language, or he's fallen over backwards. But why is there a catcher behind? I thought if the Holy Spirit is pushing him over, you'd think that, you know, he should be allowed to push him over. Anyway, another subject, but one has to be cautious. On the other hand, we don't want to be anti-supernaturalists and say, well, God cannot do anything. That's not right either. You talked earlier about miracles in your life, and we would echo that language. We do feel that God has been leading in unmistakable ways.
But when it comes to this figure,
Yes.
we have to be real careful because these are real signs and wonders.
Absolutely.
This figure
Yeah.
has power.
Of course.
So you say the fake stuff
Yeah.
we have seen for almost
Yeah.
2,000 years.
Yeah.
But then imagine if they're falling for that, imagine
Yeah.
this
Other
guy's
forms.
going to bring the fire
Right.
down from heaven and stuff
Yeah.
like that. I mean,
We are talking here indirectly it's about the two witnesses, another story, but in Revelation 11 you have two prophet figures who do have extraordinary miraculous powers, but that's another story. But the Antichrist, yes, he gets his crowd. Perhaps he's the false prophet as well. It's the PR man of the Antichrist. Gets a crowd by miracle, right? You can do that. So, that's the warning here. Finishing off in Daniel 8, because we've done enough on this, noting verse 23 then, in the latter period, the last phase of their rule, one of these four it turns out to be, this awful guy, who I take to be the anti-Christian figure, and he's working wonders by all sorts of deception. But he gets to be broken, doesn't he? In your margin there, you might want to put 11:45 of Daniel 11:45, and he gets to be broken without hand. That's 11:45, where the king of the north, another clue, he's known as the king of the north. King of the north gets to be broken in the land in 11:45. That's parallel then to this man who is supernaturally broken eventually.
in the land.
In the land, yes, and that doesn't work for Antiochus Epiphanes at all. It doesn't work for Titus because Titus did not come to his end. He died naturally 18 years later. So what I'm trying to get rid of, some of the so-called historicist explanations of this don't work well, right? It isn't true that the Great Tribulation produced quite this sort of a guy in 70 AD. Yes, you can think of all of those as forerunners. You can certainly say Antiochus is a type. You can certainly say that AD 70 was a ghastly, ghastly thing. 1 million Jews died. However, Jesus did not come back at the end of that procedure, and we're still waiting. So that's why we are so-called classical futurists. The early church fathers were. This system works best for me. You've got a future millennium, 1,000, but it doesn't matter, whether it's 999, whatever. You've got a long period of time when people are ruling with Christ, I get that. But before that, you've got an awful burst of agony, namely the Great Tribulation. Then 2,300 days and night, I take that literally. I don't know what else to do with it. That's about 6 years and 4 months or so, and 10 days. And then that temple will be restored. Why not? For us in the millennium, let's not be offensive by naming it millennium. It's called the first stage of the kingdom of God, right? The first stage of the visible kingdom of God. When that happens, I think there will be a temple. That's Ezekiel 40, 48, probably, something like that. So there's going to be a restoration of that sort of temple effort.
I heard from, we were watching, Randy, by the way, thank you for the Michael Brown, what's his face? The other guy, the rabbi.
Rabbi
Toby.
Botea.
Boteach. Boteach.
That's an interesting debate. Randy sent his YouTube debate with Brown, who's a Messianic Jew, and a rabbi. The rabbi said that in his understanding, in his world, Judaism,
Yes.
he's a practicing Jew.
Yes.
The Messiah will rededicate the temple.
Yes.
Is that
Absolutely.
something we can?
Very absolute standard. There's a lot of material that's parallel. I don't think the Watchtower would probably do much with that, but if you look at Judaism, masses of parallels, right? The Talmud, the Mishnah, the Midrash, all of these things. A lot of what we're saying here is standard Jewish stuff.
What do they mean by rededication? Like rebuilding? Or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. The temple for Jews today is very important. They'd love to have it. They haven't been allowed to have it, but it's certainly quite within the realms of possibility. It would have.
Just the last question from Michelle.
Yeah.
Based on our conversation, can you comment on Matthew 24:14?
Yes.
And then the end will come.
Yeah.
The end. The end of everything in the whole world.
And at the end of the age. There's only one end. The end of the age will.
What type of end, I guess, is the
Well, it's the end of the age. You know, if you are very unscrupulous in selling things, you equivocate on a given word. You change the meaning of a word in mid-sentence, and you deceive. It's called equivocation. So the initial question, Matthew 24, is, what will be the sign of your coming and end of the age? It's one idea. Grammatically, it's one idea. Of course, because they've been reading the book of Daniel. They could read in Daniel there was going to be trouble in temple prior to the second coming, the resurrection. Right? They knew that. That's common ground. It's not common ground for people today. They don't know the book of Daniel. So they come at Matthew 24 without the background, and they don't understand, I think, where the disciples are coming from. Okay, so with that then, what will be the sign of your coming, parousia, and the end of the age? It's the same thing. Obviously, I mean, they didn't have to explain that. So, talking about 70 AD is fine as a type, but don't talk about it too much like preterists do, because then you'd have to have the resurrection. Now you're stuck, right? There are full preterists out there, we battle with them, saying that Christ came back in 70 AD. Well, wait a minute, then the resurrection happened? Well, yes, but we didn't see it. You've given up the faith if you go with that. That's just impossible.
Is the brick aeon there?
Of course, the end of the age. Syntelia. Actually, this not more or less related word. Syntelia to aeonos means the end events of the age.
Right, the translation.
Consummation of the age. Yes.
Only the Amplified, as far as I can see,
Yes.
inserts the
It's the same idea.
of the age.
Yes.
So it gets then the end,
Yes.
and then in brackets of the age.
No, of the age is there. To aeonos in the Greek, quite clearly. The end, the conglomeration of events that make up the end. The age is there. The end of the age is right.
Really? So
Absolutely.
I get
Of course. What age is it? So the end of the age is not 70 AD. The end of the age for me has to be future. Because the end of the age is when your face is going to shine like the sun in its strength in the kingdom. I'm not seeing that now. The end of the age. Again, you do your Bible study, you say, join the dots. Matthew has that phrase 5 times. The end of the age. You say, all right, let me sit down. Write this one out. Got 5 of them. Clearly, it's future. It says this gospel will be preached in Matthew 24:14. Will be preached. This gospel of the kingdom, by the way. Not any old gospel. The gospel about the kingdom will be preached in the whole wide world, and then the end will come. There's only one end in mind. You got it? If you say earlier, he said the end is not yet, right? Let's talk about the end, all right? Now, the end is not yet. I'm not switching terms on you. If I did, I'd deceive you, right? This is the way we operate. You must keep stability in language. So, first question is then, when will the end of the age be? In verse 9 of 24, he says the end is not yet. We haven't switched the ends, thankfully. Otherwise it's a muddle. Then when we get to 14, when you see this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world, and then the end will come. There's only one end in mind, you got it? The problem is that people are terribly obsessed with AD 70. What they cannot see is this. Let me help you with this. Jesus had just finished saying to the Pharisees in Matthew 23, the Pharisees standing in front of me say, you killed Abel. Did they? Think about that, please. You, standing in front of me, killed Abel. You killed all the wicked, all the good people from Abel to Zechariah. From Genesis to 2 Chronicles. That's Jesus' Bible.
Right.
You see the corporate you? Oh, in the West we don't hear that, right? I'm talking to you, I'm not talking to your ancestors. Come on. We've got to think Hebraically, otherwise we get in a mess.
The Greek here has
Yes.
exi, to, telos. I don't see H.
What verse are you in now?
24:14, Matthew?
Yes.
I'm trying to find the word H here.
Then the end will come.
Yeah,
end.
it just says
End.
to,
So tell us.
telos, not the H word though.
It
That was
doesn't
the
matter.
question.
It's the end. There's only one end. The end is in the
Okay.
first question.
So you're...
Yeah, of course. It's the same. I'm making my
Like the
point about
Amplified
privilege.
Bible, that's adding the end.
The end of the age is the
Because
question.
it's always
Again.
there.
Right.
Verse 9 says the end, the telos, is not yet. Then, when you see this, then the end is coming, right? We haven't switched meanings. That would be awful.
So the end and end of age
Yes.
and last day
Yes.
and second
Absolutely.
coming,
Yes.
all of this is one
One
event.
event.
Amen.
I think
So
Amen.
is the end after the 1,000 years?
Oh, that's a separate question. We do have an expansion of all that in Revelation 20. I grant you.
So the end is not one day.
In
It's
Matthew-
a
Yeah.
and
In
you
Matthew
see
24, if we're just looking there, the end of the age,
the last day,
the end,
second coming.
second coming, all the same. He's not talking about what might happen 1,000 years beyond that. That's a separate issue in Revelation 20.
Right, there's
Yeah,
an
I know.
extension to the end. See, I'm trying to figure out that end. Is it the last day, the second coming, the
They're all
Thessalonians?
They're all
Is it-
synonymous.
Right.
Right, but so
They're-
so when he says go preach this gospel,
Right.
and lo, I'll be with you
To the end of the age.
Right.
That's the end. That's
It's the
it.
second coming.
Judgment, resurrection, everything is
Absolutely.
there. So
That's right.
there's a afterwards of that.
The new age, yeah.
Then when he
End of
comes
this
back,
age is
kingdom-
the beginning of the
the
new
kingdom
that's
age.
the
age.
beginning of the
Yeah.
new age. It's the end of
Because-
this present age.
Which gets taken over from Revelation. It's just dealing with it.
Well, you have to talk about what are you going to do. Let's say you are now resurrected.
It's
You're
the
saying,
kingdom
this is
of
nice,
earth.
this is the end.
It's the
Now
kingdom.
what's, now what?
With immortals and mortals
Ah.
existing at the same time.
Right, so when Jesus comes, this present evil age, right,
Right.
that Lord's day, the day of judgment, it's all
Resurrection.
synonymous,
Yep. Right, right.
ends, and then Jesus begins
Yeah.
with us, the new age,
The
let's
age
call
to
it.
come.
The
He
age
begins
to
his
come.
reign with resurrected
Absolutely.
immortals.
With us.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
people who have known Christians that live,
Yes.
that have died, they will see them
Of
raised
course. All the
with
faith.
the body that
all
can't
the-
die. But they will still be able to die. The mortals will still be able to die.
There
because
are
they can't-
surviving mortals.
Right.
So then death isn't conquered at the end.
It's conquered for you, but we're not talking about other people who are
Other
surviving.
nations.
Here's the reason.
Because I'm
It
confused.
sounds like,
Because
okay.
1 Corinthians 15 speaks about
Okay.
his coming, the end,
Right.
and death shall be
Okay.
swallowed up.
Just leave that a second, not we'll deal with that, but think of this. What is your reward in Revelation 2? I will give you power over the, what's the next word? Nations. Where are they coming from? Christians? You're going to rule other Christians? No, of course not. Ah, the nations. There's pause on that one. The whole picture is that there are people.
You'll have Germany, that type of
Of
nation
course.
mentality.
Oh, totally. Let's go to Zechariah. You've got, if Egypt will not keep the feast, there'll be no rain. What are you going to do with that one?
So if I got three individuals up under me during that reign, that's my nation as a saint that's
Who said
lived
three?
into- Oh, well, you say nations, we'll have rule over nations. So
Where you
each
go,
Christian where there's a whole
Well,
lot
wherever
of
he puts you, Hawaii, I don't care. My
Five
point is
cities.
there are nations, there are mortal nations to be ruled over, otherwise that's a meaningless
10
statement.
cities or 5 cities, yeah.
Five cities.
That's real cities, right?
Well done, Daniel. Take
In
charge
real
of
nations.
5 cities. That's interesting. This
Yeah,
is your
the-
father. That's lovely.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, it's all kind of ends that I'm trying to figure
yes,
out
yes.
what the scripture's meaning.
Remember that the
There's an
prophet,
end with resurrection, there's an end with the millennium, there's an end with the devil being bound,
Yes.
and then there's the end of the great white.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So there's several ends
Oh,
that I'm trying
well,
to
surely.
yeah,
tie
to piece
scripture to
together.
Yeah.
what end
It's
is
not
he
all
speaking
dealt
of.
with in one place. That's the key.
Right.
We've only done one section of it, like the immediate second coming.
Yeah.
And I'm suggesting to you that there must be nations for you to rule over and cities for you to take care of.
Just to go back to the nations part, you know, we forget that Israel initially is called a light to the nations.
Yes.
So Israel is the head of nations, the head of Commonwealth. So people forget that in the kingdom,
Yeah.
there will be nations, obviously, because the prophecy was always about Israel.
And
And now,
Jesus ruling there.
right, and now we're applying that to the church as the Israel of God, as the international Israel. So we will be the light to the nations.
So, well, Jesus actually said that. You are the light of the world.
Right.
He said you are.
Right.
But not only now, but your destiny is just huge. Again, this one to echo in your head. Well done, Daniel. Take charge of, be in authority over 5 cities or 10 cities. What is that? This is good Baptist stuff.
Sorry, Anthony, we gotta. Sorry, because my thing is about to die. Can you read that?
But my NLT translation has an interesting story
Yes.
about Daniel's fervent prayer life.
Yeah.
One night, a soldier was caught creeping back to his quarters from the nearby woods. Taken before his commanding officer, the soldier was charged with communicating with the enemy. The man pleaded that he had gone into the woods to pray alone. "Then you'd better start praying now," roared the officer. "You never needed it so much." Expecting certain death, the soldier knelt and poured out his soul in eloquent prayer. "You may go," said the officer when the soldier had finished. "I believe your story. If you hadn't drilled so often, you wouldn't be doing so well under fire."
Good stuff. Good training. Yeah.
Oh, we better write this out.
We'll do some more with that.